Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zadare Enterprises would like to remind you that what we know historically about Yasuke is that he is a slave brought by Jesuits to Japan, and he was bought by Nobunaga as a novelty. That's the only things we know. Anyone who tells you that he was made a samurai, given a fief, made to fight, none of these are recorded at all. And anyone who says otherwise or points to a Wikipedia article that has been the result of a editing war for the last 5 days can go fuck themselves.
Look, there's a reason your professor doesn't let you use Wikipedia as a source.
At best, it's a tertiary source. It's supposed to lead you to primary sources.
Mm-hmm.
And tertiary sources are not submittable on college-graded papers.
And
at least not unsupported.
Let's also not forget the fact that there's a reason why you have a bunch of different sources and cross-sourcing when doing any sort of historical research, or even just modern day research. Speaking for myself, I go through multiple news sources that end up covering the same thing, because oftentimes there's little details that one picks up and the other didn't.
We do know that the reason Yasuke was purchased by Nobunaga, and this is from one of the Jesuit missionaries' account books, is that he thought it was strange that any human could have black skin.
That, and he probably enjoyed making other warlords very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, there were times that he probably brought Yasuke with him to the table, and they were like, "There's an Oni at the table. What the fuck?"
Mm-mm.
But that's at most that could be hearsay. Regardless, Rails Monk.
Yes. So it is once again that time for us to delve into a brand new season of the Valley of the Judged. After our little foray with Gods of Metal Ragnarok, and then briefly touching into the interesting systems we saw with Fallen Gods, it's time to get into a full book once again. And I do hope some of you appreciated the emergency valleys that we did over the last week. I didn't plan on doing 2 of those in the span of less than 10 days. It was just a confluence of circumstance that led to that. Which is a nice way of saying the coin landed on its edge.
Yeah, but even when the coin lands on its edge, you can't trust Sora or Shiro. They did it on purpose. And anyone who gets that reference, you know that the greatest anime that never got a sequel season should get one.
Mm-hmm. But more importantly, after those little ventures, it's time for us to go into a full book once again. And I did spin the wheel on this, and Gubat-Banwa was the thing that got on it. Now, I do want to note a couple things. One, we are probably going to screw up pronunciation. I know that I usually get at least one person on my ass every time I cover every time I cover any sort of game that is themed around East Asia and screw up pronunciation. I want you to know that I'm not spending several years learning a whole new language just for one game.
I would also like to note that East Asia and Southeast Asia are neighbors, and this is Southeast Asia, but the idea remains the same. I'd also like to do a little bit of housekeeping. I know that when we've been referencing Gubat-Banwa in previous things, I said Tagalog, which is the wider known one of the wider known languages of the Philippines. However, the specific language being used in this book is not Tagalog. It's Cebuano, which is an ethnic dialect that is specific to the southern Philippines. So my bad there, but That just reinforces we're not learning a dialect known to half of a country.
I wouldn't even learn a dialect known to a full country for the purposes of this. That's way too much of a time and money investment just to satisfy people who are more interested in that than the actual contents of a game.
Yes. And even the writers themselves in one of their sections said don't stress the terminology. So we're not gonna.
Yeah. Now, this was a weird one to format in our usual style because the book is 651 pages long. And while that page count is a bit deceptive because a lot of this is single column, there is the fact that the way the book flow works doesn't quite work within how I structure Valley of the Judged seasons.
So we had to do a little bit of chopping and rearranging.
A little bit of chopping and rearranging. There's going to be some parts that are going to be out of order if you were to read the book from front to back cover. But it's done in this way to try and maintain a degree of flow according to how we do things with the Valley of the Judged.
And there are previous seasons of the Valley, if anybody has watched, where we've had to do this before, especially with the longest season. I love you, Jeremy and Travis, but holy fuck, Planet Bound was a half a year.
Yeah, Planet Bound was almost enough to be a full-on anime season.
It, yes, filler episodes and all.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do have an opening and ending theme for these streams, so all that I'm missing is Ichiro Mizuki.
That was a bit forced there, Monk.
Yes.
But the way that we're going to be reading this is in a way to try and make narrative sense from our review standpoint, and is in no way a reflection of what we think the book should be arranged around.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been that way.
No. And we've always done a bit of skimming, if only because when it comes to the fluff end of a given book, in our style, there's not a whole lot to really dissect. That's not to say that it's not important, but when describing when reading out the description of a campaign setting, for instance, what can really be said, especially when my whole goal with these reviews and the bulk of the channel is showcasing what's out there and who it would fit for.
We briefly touch upon some of these things, especially if they're central to the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you had to touch. In fact, I think I remember this from your review. When you, or not review, but interview, excuse me. When you, such as with Cloudbreaker Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Cloudbreaker Alliance is very tied to its setting in many ways, so you do have to at least explore a little bit of that setting.
Yeah.
But not all the minutiae.
I would have done that anyways, just because its setting was so fucking good.
Fair. There's our two exceptions. When the setting is tied to mechanics in a way that is meaningful, and when the setting's that fucking good.
Yeah, but to use another example, I had to kind of do that when I reviewed the Genesis Rebirth several years ago.
Exactly. There are ways that if an established setting is tied to the game in a way that is mechanically significant, you do at least have to describe some part of the setting.
And I definitely had to do that with Exalted.
You can't do Exalted without describing its setting, at least a little bit.
And I kind of did that with Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition. But the core book outright says you don't really need the Third Imperium setting for it. Whether or not I
And I
agree with
can.
that is I'm kind of 50-50 on. And the only reason I didn't do that with Traveler 5 was because of the fact that Traveler 5 was so haphazardly put together that my brain just quit midway through when I was trying to write that out in the script.
Traveler 5 reads like a Nissan Acura owner's manual.
And
Yes, I mixed those two on purpose. Fuck you all. But
I'd like to point out as well that since Traveler 4 also kind of had that problem, maybe Mark Miller should just stay out of the kitchen for a while.
and of course there is one setting that we've had to talk about because it is tied directly to the game, and well, you can't really talk about the game without the setting. L5R and Rakugan.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is to say that while we do understand that the lore and fluff and world building are necessity tongue work necessarily, thank you, tongue, important to the tone and meaning of the game, mechanically, even if they are tied in mechanically, we're not going to go into the minutiae. And Gubat-Banwa is no different. Its setting is very important to the tone of the game. And I'm assuming that there are going to be some mechanical consequences to them, considering the description of the cosmology that we'll go into later.
Mm-hmm.
But we aren't going to get into the minutiae of it.
Now, that said, there is one particular aspect that I feel I have to address because this is kind of an elephant in the room for me, and it was something that I gradually realized as I was going through it. Because while I kept a passive eye over this game for the last 2 or so years, um, I wasn't really diving into things because I was waiting for some form of 1.0 of it. Because for the longest time it kept getting updates to itself. So I didn't like the fact that I was constantly playing catch up for about 6 months, and that has to do with the fact that I am well aware the perspective that this was originally written in mind. I am well aware of the type of setting and the type of world that it wants to cultivate. I am aware of all of this. I'm saying that my awareness of all of this because I do not want that to be used as a means of shifting any goalposts with what I'm about to say. I have a bit of a problem with the execution therein in several parts of the prose. Now, there are multiple writers on this, so who takes the blame for this is something that I will never know, because when it comes to these sort of things, it's not like individual sections are given credit. That's never how this kind of works. But a lot of the parts, especially when it comes to unlearning things or respectability, are written in a way that feels very condescending. And this was something that you and I talked about early on, Zan.
Yes.
Before we went live, we talked about this particular issue with certain parts of the text.
I will note that these parts of the text, for the most part, are not necessarily part of the main text. There are a couple, but most of these things that we're seeing are either prior to the table of contents or just after the table of contents before you get into the meat of anything. One of the ones that I specifically took issue with was the content warning page, because a lot of the content warnings are your mileage may vary sort of stuff. Like religion is mentioned as one, and it's like, but there's religion in a bunch of RPGs that's core to themes.
It's not like there's a whole
Um,
archetype that is tied to various religions in just about every fantasy game that we've ever covered in or out of this show.
Two archetypes, no less:
Mm.
paladins and clerics.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, one of the others is tremendous violence, which, if you read some of the other parts in the preamble, I guess is the best way to call it. Um, this game is a quote gamified love letter to wuxia and Hong Kong martial arts films, to Southeast Asian epics, both lost and loved. It is fantasy on our terms. Like, warning about tremendous violence is simply superfluous, redundant. And then complex interpersonal relationships. Is that not every fucking good role playing game? How the party acts with each other, how the party acts with NPCs, how the party acts with enemies, how the party acts with fucking deities.
It's definitely the case um when it comes to games that have a narrativist bent.
Yeah, I think the two content warnings that I uh, that I found most head scratching: class struggle, which there are plenty of games where um, caste systems, etc., exist. So I don't think that there needs to be a warning for that. And non-standard defaults and perspectives. And I'm going to read this one specifically because this one does feel a little preachy, a little condescending. Gubat-Banwa inherently assumes a different kind of default. When we speak of kings, we're speaking of merit-filled Dharmarajas clad in gold jewelry riding elephants and or sailing with a retinue of peerless swordsmen and lancers. When we speak of dragons, we speak of sea and sky deities with bulging eyes and long fangs, deified and revered. Hew close to thee. I understand that your setting is based in this unified whole of the history and cultures of the Philippines and Southeast Asia at large. That is a cool thing to try and build off of. It's an especially cool thing when it's part of your own cultural heritage and your own ancestral descendancy, etc. That it's a love letter, cool. But then prescribing it, hew close to these, is a prescription. You're telling people do this, is a bit condescending, and that also is shown in the safety tools section where it says, due to the nature of the game, it is mandatory to play with safety tools. It is not mandatory to play any game in any way that you tell me to. There is the ubiquitous and, omnipotent, frankly, Rule 0. Rule 0 exists for a reason, and that's so people can go, there's a part of a game that I don't really agree with or get on with or think it's kind of clunky or I just don't like it. I'm going to snip that out or change it or do whatever I want with it. Rule 0.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, prescription is not it. Anytime you see prescription in a book like this, in any book like this, not just Gubat-Banwa, but any DTRPG, it speaks of rather, hey, here's this cool game, try it out, try these things I made. It's, hey, here's the game I made, play it this way because I said so. It's very condescending.
I want to make clear that I am not singling anyone out when it comes to this issue, because I have spoken about having this exact same issue with certain ivory tower elements of the old school Renaissance, the OSR and BroSR. In fact, in that video that became a bit infamous from a few months ago, I made allusions to religious scholars in this regard, as well as the fact that you and I have spoken at length about design by gospel. The reason why this kind of thing bugs me the way that it does is because Zan and I, as part of the ethos of this temple, want as many people to try out and play as many different games as we can help foster. And
It,
you,
the
as the saying
and the
goes, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
yeah, and the ethos behind the ethos, if you want to get really uh, fun, or even the pathos behind the ethos, if we want to get to the emotional side of it, there tabletop RPGs as a medium are for everyone. Everyone can enjoy them. Not every game is for everyone, but we are confident that given enough exploration, there is a game somewhere out there for anyone.
I've referred to my
It,
reviews as being a tailor for that exact reason.
yeah, you you know, Monk and I have played so many systems at this point that tabletop RPGs basically are just for us. Give us a tabletop RPG, we'll look through it, and if we think it's cool, yeah, let's play that one. Yeah, let's play the next one. Let's play it. Let's play it over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But we understand that there are people who want focused experiences. They want to focus on something that really suits them, and that's what we're trying to do by showing off so many games. And when you take what this game looks fucking phenomenal. The art is great. The idea, at least from what I've seen thus far, sounds spectacular. But the language that you're then using to say things like you have to use safety rules, or you need to unlearn prejudices and stereotypes, or anything like that, that is, in my opinion, and I think rightfully so, a misstep. That is something that
it is most definitely a misstep, because whenever it comes to these lengthy discussions about what the right way to do things is, what it ends up creating is ironically the opposite. You know, with people walking on so many eggshells that they decide to just do the standard fare of fantasy because they don't have to because at least that they don't have to worry about whether or not they're doing it right. You know, hyper focusing on not doing the wrong thing can be a problem. And
yeah,
I do want to make explicitly clear, I am not singling anyone or anything out in regard to this due to any sort of bias. But rather this is built on what I have observed over my many years with TTRPGs all across the world. I know that for some, the all that they know is maybe D&D, and there's the temptation to write as if that's all that one knows. But if someone's picking a game like this up, they probably have some degree of understanding that they're not going to be getting the melting pot.
they're not going to be having the Western fantasy the Western European fantasy pastiche that we have been calling the Tolkien melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be super clear here about the things that I've already mentioned that I took issue with. The issue is not with the game or with your love of what you've created, because it's very clear this is a labor of love. It is specifically the way that you have phrased certain things that make it seem like you are a parent on high telling a child how they should play. When in the content warnings under non-standard defaults and perspective, everything was cool up until you got to the very last sentence, hew close to these. That is a prescription. That is a very direct prescription of do this. You could have used a sentence with I could have changed the sentence to 4 different words, and the tone would change entirely. And that is, revel in these differences. Revel. Find joy and merriment in them. Revel in these differences. And you would lose the tone of, I'm telling you to do something, to have fun with this cool shit we made.
Mm-hmm.
It really is about tone. And I know that you guys want this game to succeed. We want this game to succeed. We want every one of the games that we enjoy here to succeed. And even the games that we're critical of, we're critical because we want to see them do better. So I feel like maybe the writing crew, or I guess Joaquin Saavedra, also known as Waxen here, might be the only writer. I think he may have gotten a little overzealous in his defense of his own culture. I don't foresee this being something like he's doing it because he's trying to be prescriptive, but he really wants people to see this from his viewpoint, and he's afraid they're not going to. And I hate to break it to you, man. Wax or Joaquin, however you want to go by, there are always going to be people who read this and don't get it. It's going to be a thing. What I encourage you to do is realize that in almost all cases, 99.9 repeating percent of cases, it's not personal. It's just someone who doesn't understand and probably can't understand maybe the viewpoint's too alien to them. And they just want to play a cool game that has cool art and cool stuff to it. Mm-hmm. And be happy with the fact that people are playing. Be happy that someone, even though they don't understand, went, this is cool enough that I want to play it.
And I'm well aware about the whole. I wrote it for people within my particular region of the world. I get that, but this is you're not you're not running every single instance of this game, and this is a game that is being presented for a much larger audience than an audience of one, and one that is for a price in either money, time, or both. It's one of those I've seen this. This is an easy trap I see with a lot of people venturing into indie work, or venturing into work that they are heavily passionate or attached to.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not having a broader perspective, or at the very least understanding that it's that once it's in the customer's hands, then any sort of influence that you have over how it works is no longer in your control. It is possible that somebody could try and force any of the games that we've talked about in the past to play like D&D. It's certainly something that we would try and discourage, but we don't have any control over that once they've picked it up.
Yep. We would just say, hey, I mean, sure, you can try to do that, but it kind of misses the point and probably won't work very well.
You'll also be doing more effort than it's worth, because you'll have to do whole swaths of house ruling.
Exactly. But I want to make this as crystal clear as possible to anyone listening, including if the actual writer of this game is listening. I believe that your game comes from a labor of love to explore the culture and history of your region of the world in a way that is fun and exciting. And you even say that you wrote it in English so that it can appeal to a wider audience, even though you absolutely could have written the whole book in Cebuano and had it just appeal to that section of the population that you were talking about. And I think that writing in a more welcoming way instead of a prescriptive way will do wonders for the reach of your game.
Mm-hmm.
I see your love in this game. I see the potential that it has. And because of that, I want to see it succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've harped on this particular diatribe enough at this point, Monk. We got our point across, so we should probably actually get into the game.
Yeah. So I think the first place that we're gonna start is going into what is Gubat-Banwa. Um,
Yep.
Although I will note the sidebar about defining an RPG precisely what it is an exercise in futility. I disagree because I've had a particular definition that I've used for over 15 years that has worked fairly well for us to the point where I implemented it in Legend Edition.
Oh, I'm opening that chapter now. Don't worry. That way I can talk about it. A role-playing game is a form of group storytelling with rules that dictate the mechanics of players' success and failure. These rules enhance the experience in two ways. First, they make the story more compelling by providing concrete gauges of a situation. Second, they provide the player with a series of interesting strategic choices, turning the experience into a game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember that I took it down to a 20 words or less version of group storytelling with codified rules to have consequences for actions.
Mm-hmm. But it opens up. Gubat-Banwa is a martial arts tactics and war drama tabletop RPG. In it, warriors have intricate, complicated relationships, sometimes so complicated that it can be too hard to keep track of at once. But that is the way of politics, the game of debts and bonds. It then goes into that it is a role-playing game and what that is. Let's define what Gubat-Banwa is. It is a game of playing as larger-than-life warriors known as Kangdugnan. I'm probably mispronouncing, but it is what it is.
I'll try to give it a better one. Kandunganon.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably both getting it wrong, but hey, remember they said don't sweat the terminology.
Mm-hmm. Very often there will be a guardian spirit known as the Umagalad, who will guide them through. Yeah.
You transpose the G and L there.
Mm-hmm.
Umalagad.
All right. Who will guide them through the world, possessing and taking control of consequences, arbitrating the world's reactions, and playing the role of every character that is not the Kanduganon.
Basically, the Umalagad is the GM.
Mm-hmm. Then what kind of stories you can tell? I'm not going to go into. I'll go into these briefly, but a freewheeling adventure across diverse lands, similar to adventure stories like Avatar: The Last Airbender and One Piece. An intense political war story, similar to games like Fire Emblem and Tactics Ogre. Wait, no Suikoden? Shame. It's not like that's been Suikoden's main point for years now.
Well, I mean, it is based on the water margin, so.
Mm-hmm. Complex interpersonal drama. This one segment doesn't have an analogy entry, but I think it's self-explanatory. Wandering heroes of martial prowess, from The Legend of the Condor Heroes to Dragon Ball Z, inspired by the wandering vigilantes of wuxia.
I love it.
I love it, though I'm not sure if I'd put Dragon Ball Z as wuxia. It's way too high powered for that.
Early Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball as well.
All of Dragon Ball. Okay, fine. I'm willing to go with that.
Dragon Ball up until he learns the Kamehameha and blasts Ox King's Mountain. Come on now. Let's be real here.
I'm okay, fine. As far as DBZ, maybe all the way up through the Saiyan arc.
I could see it through to the end of the Frieza arc, to be honest. Like, sure, it's gone from wuxia to shanxia at that point, but
Hmm. Oh,
I understand what he means by wandering heroes of martial prowess, because that absolutely describes Dragon Ball Z.
yes. Rise Against, popular, and they reference Star Wars, Iron Council, and Les Miserables.
I like that they referenced Iron Council. That's
Hmm.
that's something that needs more recognition.
Yeah. The only one of those three I don't quite agree. I don't quite agree with using here is Star Wars, if only because there's so many elements that Star Wars encompasses that you can't really put it to one bullet point.
I think they mean like if I'm thinking about it here, I would think that they mean the original trilogy or even just A New Hope.
That I could see, but I have to be I have
You
to
have to
be
couch
anal.
it. I know.
Hmm. The idyllic green and blue, um, which is says the deep forests, the
Okay.
grasslands, the holy mountains, the vast oceans, the cold river springs. These are the things we fight for to preserve the world from atrocity. Inspired by stories such as Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, and Breath of the Wild.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. I don't think Breath of the Wild was quite about preserving the wilds.
No.
It was about how everything went back to the wilds after Calamity Ganon fucked shit up. But I understand the impression.
Hmm.
A an idyllic, almost back to nature approach.
Hmm.
Let me get this really cool spread of the Sword Isles, the main place that this is all taking place in. Leads us to where is Gubat-Banwa?
Hmm.
It has some sidebars about what's beyond the Sword Isles, like the far northern and southern pillars. The big thing is that the Gubat takes place on the Sword Isles, and there's 5 major political powers. Um, the Isles are populated by Tawo, which are supposed to be us, you and me. Um, and then there are foreigners called Sina.
Hmm.
And then they talk about how there's a bunch of humanoid beings from outside the Sword Isles, and the center of the world being the Mountain of Apu, the central pillar of space,
Hmm.
which pierces through all 14 layers of the cosmology we'll get into. Um, and then, of course, there's a line bisecting the world, which is the path the sun travels.
Hmm.
It's really fun how it describes all of this. But the cosmos itself is called Ankalibutan. And I know I said that one wrong. And they also say to imagine the world as a giant coconut floating in a vast sea of wine.
I'm. I know some people would say that's odd. Counterpoint: RuneQuest and RuneQuest gave me a world as a cube in a in a weird ass ocean.
Yep.
So this is just standard fare for us.
Yeah. Now there's 7 upper layers on the upper shell of Kalibutan, which I would assume means it's above water, since it says it's a coconut floating in a sea of wine, and 7 lower layers, which I would assume would be below the waterline. And each layer of the upper layer is guarded by a Garuda, giant birds of smokeless flame, which I'm sure most people would actually assume is Garuda, but remember that, well, it did come from somewhere. And so in the upper shell, you have the 7 layers, starting from the 7th down to the 1st. The top layer is furthest from mortals. The 6th layer is where rescued souls go and angels serve. The 5th layer is where the highest mountains and Tree of Life are. The 4th layer is the land of the sun, moon, and stars. The 3rd layer is the land of the gods, and that warriors who die in combat are brought here by a rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. No, actually, that's kind of common, isn't it? Now that I think about it, warriors that die in battle going to a specific heaven for them is kind of common the world over. Most people associate that with Valhalla, but it's everywhere now that I'm thinking about it.
I mean,
So
I believe the Greeks had their own equivalent.
yeah, parts of
The details might be different, but the broad strokes are similar.
yeah, innocent souls and valorous souls went to the Elysian fields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The second layer is the land of the ancestors. And this is described as these ancestors stride freely between this and the land of the gods, for they become gods themselves. And then the first layer of the upper shell is the land of the wind spirits. I am not going to try and say the words for all of these different Bunwa, and they are all Bunwa. Every one of the names has Bunwa in it. No, I might say Himalaya Bunwa for the sixth layer, because that's really close to Himalaya. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's comparable, considering that Tibet, I don't think technically counts as Southeast Asia, but, it might be close enough in certain ways.
Oh, great. Now you got me thinking of the Tibet RPG I reviewed 9 years ago.
You're welcome, Monk. I'll bring up blasts from the past as much as I can. But the lower shell is where earthly mortals reside, and the first layer is Gubat-Banwa, and it's the one where mortals and spirits thrive. It's the one closest to the first layer of the upper shell. So if we're imagining these layers, the upper shell at the top starts at layer 7, comes down to layer 1. Then at the cut-off point into the lower shell, it starts at layer 1, goes down to layer 7. The second layer is the abode of tree and mountain spirits and garden spirits. The third layer is the layer of the sea, which stream in past the world jaws from the endless ocean of wine. Sea gods and mighty kingdoms. Okay.
Yeah.
The fourth layer is the layer of freshwater spirits and water spout spirits. The ancestor spirits in the form of crocodiles rule the earth. Crocodiles ruling the land. It fits. It fits. The fifth layer is the layer of subterranean spirits, the gods of lower soil, caves, and lost things, and an underground ocean. And it's technically the afterlife for many Swords Isle people. And it's owned by a man whose name I will not try to pronounce because I'm pretty sure I'll screw it up. Also known as the Slaver of Souls, who forces folk not saved by a different god to toil in death as they did in life. The sixth layer is the layer of punishment, known as Nerak, or the Inferno. Adherents of some specific religions fall here when they die and did not follow the tenets of their faith. And then, of course, other people fall there if they have to be cleansed of misdeeds in their life. And then the seventh layer is called the empty layer, where the 4 pillars of the world uphold the rest of the layers, and where there is no sound. The world shakes when the abyssal boar or abyssal serpent shakes the world pillars. Sometimes chains rattle impossibly in its vaunted halls. I like that description. I'm not going to lie, that description's pretty fucking cool. And once again, we have a layered cosmology. Monk, it's turtles all the way down. Just all over again. It's turtles all the way down. That joke is never not relevant for anyone who doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm. And if you get it, congratulations, you are cultured. If you don't get it, acquire culture.
So, Homer, I don't know if you were here for the beginning. Homer commented, "It's quite weird that no Filipino names for the levels of the world in the game. They're not." I don't know if you mean specifically using Tagalog names, because they're using Cebuano. The language that they're using in here is specifically Cebuano. So I don't know if that would change your understanding of the names or not, considering that you are Filipino, Homer.
Yeah.
It's fun that we actually have someone who would know more about this than us in in the comment
I
section.
did tell him in advance that I was going to be doing this, and I may tap him for any sort of pronunciation help.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I want to go over the 7 layers of the upper shell, the names are Wanang Bunwa, Himaya Bunwa, Buhi Bunwa, Langit Bunwa, Balahala Bunwa, Apo Bunwa, and Hungin Bunwa.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm probably pronouncing all of those wrong, but those are the names that were used.
Mm-hmm.
There are also names in the lower ones, obviously Gubat-Banwa, uh, Kahoy Bunwa, Kadagatan, Kasubanan. Then it doesn't have a name for the 5th layer, other than the underground ocean being Sulad,
Mm-hmm.
and the Inferno being Nerak. And then, of course, the empty layer has no name, is what it says.
Yeah. And right after that, we go into how do you play. And it goes right into it. Good. Hesitation is defeat.
Nope.
Gubat-Banwa expects the players to revel in larger than... Actually, before we even get to how do you play, there's one other thing I forgot. Again, we're jumping about, so we'll get to how do you play in a minute.
Oh, you want to go to the Hibiscus Sutra?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which more or less covers the bullet points of the cosmology. And I will have to note one thing. Some names in this have a little thing to ease the pronunciation problem, but it's not consistent. And there's some names that really need it. I don't know if that was just forgotten in editing or what have you, but there's some parts that could use it.
I am aware, Homer, that Nadak is a Sanskrit word. I mean, it's a lot of Sanskrit is used in a lot of East Asian and Southeast Asian religions these days, because Sanskrit was all over that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Dragon says that I summoned a demon with bad pronunciation. My response: my pronunciation is probably better than Monk's.
No comment.
It's the polite version of "fuck you."
Mm-hmm.
Yes, most okay. Homer, do you have any idea how little that narrows it down for Asian languages in general? There's pitch accents in Japanese. There's multiple pitches for every syllable in Chinese. There's even, like, the simplest one is technically Korean, technically. Like, if you look at Hangul. Regardless, let's get to the Hibiscus Sutra.
Mm-hmm. So, a most curious sutra. Recorded on Eontar, written upon it are the most common and important words recorded in Gubat-Banwa. In alphabetical order, no doubt written by a great sage, refer to it with reverence. We have the 7 layers of the tripartite world. These are 7 layers to the world, 3 upper layers, 3 lower layers, and a single mortal realm in the middle, which we've already covered.
And there's technically 14 layers to the world, but only the mortals only know about these ones, apparently.
Yep. Then Agma Damlag. Agma means religion. Damlag means the full moon. This is the term used for the Akai Sultanate's majority religion, where they believe in Goddess, who sent her prophet. I am not going to try and pronounce that.
Sikandag.
Sikandag, thank you. To teach her laws and pillars. Goddess will bring all her faithful into lunar heaven, which resides in the light side of the moon. The moon has a dark side, which is where enemies of Goddess are brought and turned into Sitan, or demons.
That's very close to Satan.
Mm-hmm. And
Satan!
Ancestor worship, in general, used to refer to the religion steeped into the culture of many folk in Gubat-Banwa. Then Anitu, worship of the ancestors of Gatsusanan, but also the collective term for Gatsusanan folk religions. The common thread that pierces through them, recognition of a pantheon, worship of the ancestors, avoidance of Diwana, understanding of the greater world of symbols. The natural world is just constantly connecting signs made by the invisible world of spirit for man to interpret to better their lives. Bolnyan, partly a shaman, partly a priestess, partly a folk healer, partly a sorcerer, but always spiritual leader. Larger realms always have multiple Bolnyan fighting over each other, commonly women, as it is a female's role. Folk that take this role are usually considered femme. And Banwa Bonwa can mean anything that is on land, a country, a village, a state, a nation, sometimes from the village all the way to the shore. Can also mean realm.
That's and that's Bunwa is a very interesting one, as is Bulyan. And I see Homer said, Cebuano lingo, I see. I cannot pronounce that even if my life depended on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So an explanation from Homer, a little bit more in depth about the Anitu, deities related to living or non-living things. One of the major factors why Filipinos are very religious, especially the statues of saints and the Roman Catholic God. Okay. I'm guessing the missionaries used the concept of the Anitu to kind of tie that into Catholicism when they came to the Philippines and Southeast Asia in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But with the second page of the Hibiscus Sutra, we have Binukot. Wealth in the Sword Isles is measured by the followers that you have and the people. Land is abundant, so it need not be controlled. Sounds kind of like the exact opposite of where the Philippines and Southeast Asia are. Binukot are the princesses of lords, be they Datu or Raja, that are hidden away and treated as things that can potentially raise a lord's situation by marrying her off to those of higher rank. Political marriages, yeah, that's pretty typical of any ruler. Binukot are trained in the ways of the sciences and ritual of art and weaving, while also being secluded from the rest of the community, never to be seen. Most Binukot have galaxy white skin because of this, and their choice of husband is decided by their father. There's also a small sidebar on veiled maidens. Binukot are an unfortunate consequence of the era, and it being here should not be read as a justification or romanticization of it. It is simply presentation of it. Much of Gubat-Banwa's drama arises from such interpersonal dealings such as this. Additionally, keep in mind that historically, not all Binukot were femme. A Hilgayanon epic once spoke of a prince that was Binukot. Okay. Then we have the Datu. Contrary to popular belief, Datu does not only mean chief, but includes the entire social class of royalty, the highest right above the aristocracy. The chief of a community is the highest ranking Datu, and his wife and first of kin being the second highest, so on and so forth. The chief of a community has multiple names, sometimes just Datu as well, other times Raja, Lakan, Ratu, Rani, Rakai, Saripada, Timwe, Tomoe, and more. I would like to point out that some of these, while they're probably Cebuano, they do seem like they'd probably be derived from the Sanskrit in the area as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Diwa, the spirit of something. Diwa of liberation means the spirit of liberation. Often also means life force of something, even mortal folk, animating essence, vim, vigor, etc. Then we have Diwata, Devata, or Deva. Well, we know what Deva are. Nature spirit or god, offered to and revered to appease, but never worshipped. Treat them like folk. They outnumber us. They live in societies invisible to us. We live in their world. Diwata is the most commonly used in the Gatusan region. Diwata of the skies are known as Langitnan or Celestines in the Rasaya Pasara. Diwata of the earth are Utanan or Chthonians in Rasaya Pasara. Rasaya Pasara seems to mean Western language in this case.
especially with a word like Chthonians. That is
Well,
Greek.
and Celestines,
Mm-hmm.
for that matter. Oh, that's annoying. And then Diwata of the sea are known as Dagatnon or Thalassians in Rasaya Pasara. That Chthonians and Thalassians are pulled directly from Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the term came to be used through Ashnin Rishi. I'm not sure how to pronounce RSI, and local sages. The enemies of the Diwata are the Gimas or Yawa, the demons. Think of these not in the Western sense of gods and demons as paragons of universal moralities. Instead, think of them as living beings imbued with supernal power, embodiments of nature. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have
Anybody
the
who's, and I think anybody who's a passing anime fan will be somewhat familiar with more animistic style faiths.
mhm. And then we have Hari, king, see Raja, a term mostly used by certain Gatusan kings, Apunan kings, or certain Gatusan Akai leaders. Hara is the feminine counterpart.
Mm-hmm. And Brent saying, "Darn you Greeks for going east to find knowledge and leaving culture."
Let's be fair. Both the east and the west were traveling towards each other because that's where the most land was.
Mm-hmm. But
After all, Khan did reach Europe.
mm-hmm. But then we have heaven, the sky, both the near sky where the air flows and the creatures of the winds travel, as well as the far sky where the Celestines and the ancestors lived, and where the moon, stars, and sun reside. Has multiple layers, all part of a 14-part cosmos. And hell, the underearth, both the immediate underworld, the subterranean provinces, as well as the far depths, Sulad, where inglorious beings live and thrive. Violent ghosts hungry for souls and demons cultivating hatred for their rivals. The gods live here. Then we have Hei Yang, the state of being completely attuned and harmonious with nature, your soul's essence aligned with the essence of the world for good and ill. Yang is an enlightened state of being, and very close and very often those in Yang cannot be affected by things within nature. Becoming Yang is rare, and only those sages who have lived for long become it. Diwata are commonly Yang, but ancestors' gods might not be. Diwata that are not in harmony, Di-Yang, can cause pollution and bad living conditions, and demons arise from them. Many corrupted gods arise from polluted places and sites of atrocious violence. Then we have Kandugnan, honor, warrior brave, freeman, think knight errant or ronin. They can choose who to serve, has its own benefits such as protection and connections, commonly become Datu themselves after they've accrued a following, can always solve problems with violence, and this was italicized. Kandugnan have no gender except for the one they choose. And I could see more knight errant than I could ronin based on that description.
Absolutely.
Especially the whole thing of being able to accrue that kind of following. That's not, if a ronin has that kind of following, then they end up becoming a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, but then we have Lakan, chief lords of the Gubat-Banwa region, as well as the Ba-Ensense region, commonly lords of port towns, comparative to Raja. Then Naga, some of the most powerful creatures in the mortal realm, serpent dragons with crest-like horns and bulging eyes, commonly gods of water or the air. The greatest Naga swim across the night sky, one of which is the Mahanaga, which is sometimes known as the Milky Way. They are venerated like ancestors and worshipped like gods, though through offerings in shrines and creating statues of them. Then the Pale Kings, the Iaizu, alien vampire fae monsters that arrive from the far western pillar of Gubat-Banwa, bringing with them the Pale. Upon flying galleons powered by the Vitae of Diwata, they arrived in the Sword Isles and sought to colonize it completely. Thanks to a concentrated effort of the five Mahamandalas, I know I messed that up. Their
Mahamandalas.
their efforts were rebuffed, yet their effects have scarred the land.
Flying galleons powered by the lives, the lifeblood of nature gods? What? 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 Okay. 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 I will continue to go on then. The Pale, a pallid alien substance that crawls across the land like ink and wafts into the air like smoke. Those corrupted by it have streaks of silver on their skin, two pale Lichtenberg veins. Excuse me, none of these people have been struck by lightning. I have Lichtenberg figures on my body from having been struck by lightning. This is bullshit. You could so easily get Lichtenberg marks. I would have done it a long time ago. The Pale is easily cleansed in the Sword Isles thanks to the abundance of jasmines, which melted away, turning it into nothingness. Mortal folk completely corrupted by the Pale become angels, gods become saints, animals become Dwyn, demons become... Is that elves?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be elves? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Monk, are the Pale Kings of the Pale just Western invaders?
I think so.
That's kind of racist. I had to. Then we get to Raja, king, leader of multiple villages, usually chosen by multiple Datu that choose a single Datu as their paramount. Usually lives in a port city where they have access to and can control trade, especially from foreign merchants. Raja are considered masculine, Rani are queens and are feminine. Sage, a term in Rasaya Pasara, known as Malam, or Malam in Bae and Verbanwa, Makinadmanon in Gatusan, Wali in Akayu faith, constitutes its own class of immortals, those that have become powerful and glorious through meditation and arcane knowledge of the... So, cultivators. It's just cultivators. Mm-hmm. Meditation and arcane knowledge of the world, it's just fucking cultivators. It's always fucking cultivators. Hey, they even have and then Rasaya Pasara. Rasaya comes from the Dirasaya Mandala in the southeastern Sword Isles in Jamyun Kulisa's Arrows. One of the premier mandalas before the current day has since fallen into relative obscurity, becoming a part of the Akai Sultanate's greater hegemony. Now it is known simply as the Saji Kingdom, after falling from regnality after the fall of the Grand Mudura Mandala, the grand enemy of Sanuwarga of the northern island of Kalakati. The common tongue across the Sword Isles. Oh, so Rasaya Pasara is the common tongue. Got it. Even those that have never met their community will know a smattering of it due to trade, unless they are truly isolated up in the mountains. Every Kadunganan must know this tongue. Rasaya, and then there's a sidebar here. Rasaya Pasara roughly translates to Market Rasaya, inspired by the historical fact that trade Malay became a lingua franca across traders and merchants in Southeast Asia. So trade Malaysian, essentially. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yep. Then we have the tripartite society. Most cultures in the Sword Isles have a tripartite society. This is made of the ruling class, a multi-tiered class, At the top are royalty, at the top of which are the rulers of their community. They commonly have a paramount lord. Paramounts hold power over the supporting lords, but not over their lords' subjects or territories. Their power mostly stems from their control of local and foreign trade and the ability to redistribute luxury goods. Below the royalty are the aristocrats. I know that bit. Sorry, couldn't resist.
Mm-hmm.
A form of minor nobility, commonly born from the blood of a lord and another aristocrat or warrior. Commonly, religious folk are part of the lower ruling class, though sometimes, depending on their lineage, they may be considered as of the warrior class instead. The warrior class. The class that supports and fights for the chief class. Another term for this is the supporter class. Warriors still have to pay tribute to their lord. They can form business partnerships, own their own bondsmen. Fucking clanners. Sorry, old habits. And borrow wealth. Their children do not inherit their property. That is up to their lord. Personal vassals of a lord are often free in that they do not have to pay tribute or fees to the lord they were a vassal to. They could have their own property and would have to fight alongside the lord they served when summoned for military reasons, such as defense or a campaign. Most Kandugnan are of this class, on the top layer of it, though not all though. Some Kandugnan are considered debtors, while others as Raja. And the debtor class, either belonging to the leader of the community or bonded to the other nobles and warriors. The vast majority of folk in the Sword Isles are debtors, working as farmers, hunters, fishers, sailors, weavers, cooks, soldiers, singers, and the like. Creditors own the debt of a person, not their body. Thus a debtor's debt can be bought and or paid off by others. Debtors are common nowadays as well due to increasing war. Debtors often passed their debt down to their children, though what is passed down is still up to their creditor. Some debtors are indistinguishable from the warrior class, especially those that must render military services to their creditor. And then there's a couple sidebars. First one on wealth. Wealth constitutes owned debtors, supporters, trade goods, pelts, lumber, rice, etc., and luxury goods, foreign items such as porcelains, exotic armaments, and other trinkets. There is no real property in the sense of owned land outside of the largest cities and Gubat-Banwa. All belongs to the world. Entrepots have taken to using coins now to better facilitate trade across communities. And we have debtor. In general, a serf, though debtors often perform military duties as well. They're not exactly slaves, as they can free themselves through labor, great valor, or by being set free by the owner of their debt. The Gutusanan term for debtor, oripun, originates from udip, which means to let live, as in to not kill in battle.
Fun. And finally, we get to this differs slightly across the 5 Mahamandalas. Gubat-Banwa has the ruling class, the working class, and the peasantry. Bae has the nobles, the religious folk, the commoners, and the debtors. Akai has the nobles, the warriors and wise men, the commoners, and the slaves, who are like debtors but do not have the same social mobility. Kingship in the Sword Isles is a complicated affair. Datu, for example, does not constitute king. It is closer to chief and is more of a social class. Raja is closer to the concept of kingship, but even then, most Raja, Lakan, and Pamagat are instituted by multiple royalties. Kingship is commonly derived from trade control, geopolitics, or number of servants, so manual labor and warrior following. And we have Trichiliocosm, a billion-fold existence. This world is just one of 1,000 worlds, each with its own multiple realms and layers. A concept introduced by Anuvaran monks. And some really nice art of different peoples of the Sword Isles.
Mm-hmm. And with that covered, now we get to the how do you play part.
Go.
Gubat-Banwa expects players to revel in larger-than-life dramatics. Oh, the warrior you just killed is actually your long-lost brother. As well as jump headfirst into fiercely tactical fights, known as violence, where their convictions, passions, and prowesses are tested against the tremendous violence of reality. Only the most ferocious and brave can weather Gubat-Banwa. Only those that know how to wield a sword and realize its killing role is a side effect of its sharpness can understand how to change it. The song commonly goes as thus. This is the gist of every interaction in the game. The more dramatic, the better, however. A player, usually the Umalglad, describes a scene, a situation, or puts down a problem, whether it be love or violence, that arises from the world.
You switch the L and the G again. It's
Yep.
Umalagad.
Yep, sorry. Then all the players react accordingly, each describing what they do in the scene. This can be direct reaction, or it can be self-expression. Whatever it is, play your role. This is the major fun of the game. You're all just playing roles. 3. When anything that the players do, or something that they want to do, has an attached mechanic, the player can follow the procedure of that mechanic. This is common in violence, dealing with debt, with honor, bartering, and doing something risky or dramatic that tests your skill, the skill cast. 4. After resolving any procedures or disputes, a player, usually the Amalagad again, I think I got it right that time,
As right as either of us will get it.
describes how the world reacts and then continues on, enacting any retribution, consequences, setbacks, and twists.
Next, next we get to a page about time and modes of play, but before that, we get to some really nice pronunciation guides. Gubat-Banwa uses a lot of non-English words to convey different concepts and experiences. In general, unless otherwise said, like how Bunwa is Bunwa instead of Banwa, this is how you say the vowels, as they always have the same pronunciation unless otherwise noted. The A character is always ah. The ah, it's always ah. The E character is always eh. The I character is always e. The O character is always o. And the U character is always u. So a u a e u a e u e o. It's the same vowel pronunciations as Japanese in this case.
A, U, O.
No, a e u o, or a e o u. Excuse me. But over in Japanese, they take the more and switch them around to a u e o.
Yeah.
But a e o u. When two vowels are together, you do not read them together. Instead, you read them separately with a glottal stop between. So, busalion would not be busalyan; it would be busalion. Yeah, it's a diphthong. This is actually quite common to a lot of East Asian languages, to be honest. But then we get to time. Let's keep track of things first. There are multiple ways of keeping track of time in Gubat-Banwa, or Bunwa, excuse me. Scenes, session, arcs, and cycles. Scenes are pretty much self-explanatory, as are sessions. Arcs are basically story arcs. They could be seen as miniature campaigns, I guess is the best way to put it. And the cycle would be a full-on campaign. Modes of play. These modes of play can be interchanged at any point. If from solo play you want to transition into co-op play, you can. Solo play is exactly that. You control a seagull Kadunganon and go through the sword aisles by yourself. You can even accrue companions, but they will not be powerful as your own Kadunganon. You usually need just one player, yourself. Or there's co-op play, short for, well, cooperative play, yeah. So in a group of players known as Kadunganon, but without an Umalagad, and you travel through the sword aisles in troop play, everyone playing NPCs and the like as they fight enemies, solve mysteries, and overthrow thrones. You usually need 2 to 5 other players with you. And then there's traditional play. It's the default mode of play common in traditional RPGs, where in a group of players as Kadunganon, while one plays as Umalagad, a sort of master of ceremonies or arbiter who facilitates the revelation of the world. You usually need 3 to 6 players here, with one player taking the role of Umalagad. I mean, if it suits all of those, that's actually pretty fucking cool. All right.
So
And since that was actually rather short, you mind if I take the next page?
yeah, which is the Golden Laws.
Yep. The Sword Isles are not a nice place. That should not be. The Sword Isles is not a nice place. The Isles is plural. In fact, it is a horrible place. They are a horrible place. It is a place that is directly horrible because of the actions of those that have gone before. Those who have perpetuated this never-ending war, this endless cycle of blood and vengeance, a never-ending cycle of life and death. I wonder if I'll ever get to meet that god and kill him. Oh wait, this isn't Nier Automata. What am I saying? This fiction can only be achieved if everyone is on this. I had to make that reference. I'm sorry. This fiction can only be achieved if everyone is on the same page. This world is a world primed for the kinds of stories Gubat-Banwa wants to tell, and you must play into your role as Kanduganan that must suffer it. Suffer it? You're a warrior. You're a warrior Fremen with honor. Why would you suffer? You'd revel in the violence. Here are principles to keep in mind to play Gubat-Banwa properly. And once again, this is where I say there could be some phrasing changing to make this sound more inviting, to sound more open. This keep in mind to play game properly is an immediately alienating statement. What I would have said here is, here are some principles with which Gubat-Banwa was designed in mind. And just leave it at that. That way people know, hey, this was what I was thinking when making the game. Maybe you guys will like it this way too. As more of a, please help explore this with me than please play this way because I said so. So the first part, agree on a theme and tone and stick to it. I have to agree with that one. If you don't agree on a theme and tone, and especially if you aren't consistent with it, the play is going to get fucked up. As a Kadunganan, you have an equal amount of work needed to do to make sure that the entire game fits the tone that your entire table has agreed upon. Make sure you hew closely to it so everyone can have fun. I really like that term, hew close. If you agreed on a light-hearted game, maybe don't inject torture into it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that suggestion, and I agree that if your group has wanted to play a light-hearted, more comedic game, sure, don't inject torture into it most of the time. Sometimes, if the story really demands it, sometimes if that shock value is necessary to get across the severity of the situation you are in, introducing a radical element compared to the tone of the rest of the game is a very good storytelling tool. However, you need to know your audience, you need to know your game, and you need to know the path that the game is flowing on. This is a good suggestion as a general rule, but that's all it is, a general rule. Experienced GMs are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure Monk is just over there nodding his head like, yeah, we get it. But inexperienced players, inexperienced GMs, keep in mind that these rules are here as a guideline to keep you within the bounds when you don't know how to break those bounds in a way that is good for your group. Eventually, as an experienced GM, you'll be like, I'm gonna nudge them in the ribs just now so they really get what's going on, and you'll do it, and your players will be like, "What the fuck, man?" But it'll get the severity across, and they'll love you more for it. Trust me. If you're going for a gritty war story, try not to stray too far from it by trying to marry a dragon to create crocodile eugenics.
Threaten me with a good time.
Those two words do not go together, but I fucking love it. Crocodile eugenics. Oh, shit. Okay. The next rule, care about combat. As a Kadunganan, your primary mode in life is to fight. Yes. You'll get into fights eventually, so operate with this in mind. In that sense, this is a combat-heavy game. What did you expect from a war drama game set in fantasy late porcelain period Philippines, which was characterized by intensifying violence? It's got a point. Remember your stats, your rules, your abilities, so everyone can have fun when the battlefield music plays. Gubat-Banwa fights last long. It's made to be that way. They are made to be interesting and major. But the only way for you to get invested into such fights is if you made it meaningful. The Umalagad will help facilitate this. Maybe the current combat has your long-lost brother, and they really want to harp on that one, don't they? Long-lost brother in it. Or maybe the foot soldiers are people you once respected. However, it is still up to you to make it meaningful to your Kadunganan. In fact, this can lead to some interesting emergent storytelling. If even during a combat you realize that your Kadunganan might sympathize, or what have you, with their enemy's plight, making it a grueling dance. Pick up the slack. The Umalagad may be singing the song, but you are still the subjects of it. You are the ones guiding the song. I like that. That is an encouragement of not only get into the combat and play it well, but get into the combat, play it well, and synergize with your GM. That is cool. Mm-hmm. Play into the melodrama. Siblings locked in eternal war. Once lovers, now enemies. Once enemies, now lovers. Play into the melodrama one would see on Filipino telenovelas, K-dramas, and even Chinese dramas. The elevated sense of drama is what makes these mediums so entertaining, and it is pretty entertaining to see on the table as well. Play into them. Don't shy away from them. This is the way you encourage people to play the game. Here's all this cool melodramatic stuff. Try playing into it. Don't be scared of it, but not you must play this way. This is a great way to write it. You should write more of your recommendations like this. Like, hey, there's all this really cool shit. You should try it out. That is what's going to get you more players. That is what's going to get you more readers. That is what's going to get you your game spread far and wide. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I leave the last page to you, Monk.
Yep. So let me get that. Portray a fantastical feudal world embroiled in war. Not just a fantastical world, but a world where Datu rule settlements, fight over manpower and not just land, and raid those that have slighted them. A world where insults are taken personally and can lead to wars, where wives and husbands are sought for by powerful chiefs. A world where malevolent forces of nature, which only appear due to the actions of the mortals themselves, arise and try to kill the Kandugnan. A dangerous and daring world that needs those that are willing to look past themselves. This need not be a pre-colonial Philippine-inspired setting either. You could make up a loose feudal society of island kings and sea queens on the spot if you're inspired enough by the lore of the game. Put a pin in that.
Wait, put a pin in it? You mean you don't have to make this Philippine-inspired? I don't know. With all the Philippine and Southeast Asian terminology we have, I think you're kind of tied to your setting, man.
I understand the intent, but that reminds me of that whole D&D can run any kind of fantasy argument that I love beating the ever-loving shit out of.
And the argument we love beating the ever-living shit out of.
Mm-hmm. Or
we double team it and we kick it while it's on the ground.
Because, look, I'm not trying to hit a man while he's down. I'm trying to kick him because that's easier. Also, there's more muscles than the legs. But I remember to use a parallel that isn't the world's most litigious role-playing game. Let's bring up Convictor Drive.
Ah, that was a good season.
Mm-hmm. Now, Convictor Drive, which we did a whole season of, a lot of people construed it as the Common Writer RPG. It can lean into that, although I would argue it has more DNA in common with Metal Heroes, especially the Space Sheriff trilogy, than Common Writer. I mean, the adept archetype in that game pretty much looks like Gavan in a legally distinct sense. It's the
Yes,
eyes. It's always the eyes.
it's always the eyes.
But
The eyes have it.
in reality, the only common writers that would really be applicable are some of the more tech-based ones of the Heisei era in general,
Fies,
and in
Kabuto.
particular, Fies is the most blatant.
Yes.
Kabuto,
I,
maybe Drive if you really want to stretch it,
y-
but we have word from the horse's mouth that one of the bigger inspirations was Iron Man.
yes. I mean, the suit and the suitcase thing.
Mm-hmm. Like that's blatantly the Iron Man cartoon from the '90s. But in this and in a similar vein, when Lancer came out, a lot of people misconstrued that as being this unilateral mecha RPG. It is not. We already have that kind of thing in things like Battle Century G and
Mecton
Mecton
Zeta.
Zeta. Lancer is married to its particular setting.
Yes.
And what I have seen, it is possible to do an RPG that leans more into a genre than it does a setting. Fantasy Craft is a good example of this. It leans into fantasy as a whole with the campaign modifiers that can make it more high fantasy, more low fantasy, or something in between. Even ancient, if you want to go that route.
Sits here smirking in Final Fantasy Legend Edition.
Mm-hmm. We are, yeah, and of course with Legend Edition, that's more or less what we are doing.
We have a
built
bunch
it
of
around.
campaign modifiers.
Mm-hmm.
Sits here smirking in Legend Edition. Just gonna say that.
But the Genesis, even though it is most definitely a post-apocalypse RPG, you couldn't run anything but the Genesis's world with it. Jeez, that I do not like how that sounded. And
Degenesis apostrophe world with it. Just say, just speak the apostrophe out loud, and it will appear.
yeah. And this is in that similar vein. I have a hard time viewing anyone playing this in a setting that isn't the Sword Isles. This is not a new phenomenon, as I mentioned with some of the others, and even
It's like trying to play. It's like trying to play L5R outside of Rakugan.
I mean, the closest you could do with that was Legend of the Burning Sands, which is neighboring Rokugan, so it's not really the answer there.
Yeah, it's not happening. Like I said.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still part of that same universe. Or imagine someone wanting to run the rule set of 7th Sea and not have it take place in Thea.
Or 13th Age and not having it take place in the Dragon Empire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But continuing on, getting back on the rails, fill the Kandugan's life with war and drama. A Kandugan's, and I know I'm screwing it up, life is always going to be embroiled in interpersonal conflict, relationship melodrama, and violent combat in a setting such as the Sword Isles, where states are at war, prides are at stake, and families are at risk. Play this up for the group. You want players to be agonizing about an NPC that they've grown attached to but might have to kill, or being intensely protective of a certain NPC. Even better, if the Kandugnan become intensely protective of each other, use their connections, their old lovers, brothers, fathers against them. As the Umagalad, you are cruel fate.
Umalagad.
Umalagad. I'll get it right eventually.
You transpose the L and G. It's funny actually.
Mm-hmm.
Monk?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I was just wondering why you went silent.
Play to find out what happens. The best thing about TTRPGs is that you don't know what will happen at the table. Even if you have an adventure planned out or are following a scenario or module, that kind of structure can only take you so far. Let their actions blossom and snowball. Push their actions to the logical limit. Have whatever structure or idea you had in mind stuck there in the background. Let it happen while the players work. And then you get a golden opportunity in the fiction. Use it. Then let the players react. Find out what happens when they do. Play to find out what happens is one of the best innovations of tabletop role-playing games. It's a principle and mindset that video games cannot replicate. Lean on it. You don't have to prep a beginning, middle, and then ending like you would a novel. Finally, somebody else who realizes that GMs are not supposed to be novelists. Instead, prep events that showcase more of the world, characters that have hidden motives and agendas, and ancient spirits and gods that have set in motion plans since the end of the Seventh Sun era. Then put the Kandugnan within them and play to find out what happens when you do.
What the hell is the Seventh Sun era?
And specific trumps general, and always round down.
I'm glad we have those actually written out, because some people make assumptions about those. Once again, we love it when something that is very key to mechanics decisions is written out in plain text. When it's specific, like most of the time we assume specific trumps general just because that tends to be the behavior. I mean, why else would you have specific rules if not to put them outside of the general and supersede them? But that's not always the case. As for rounding up or down, well, depending on how you round can really change things. So telling you which direction you're rounding tells you, what the intent for that rounding is.
It also helps minimize arguments.
Yes.
But
although rules lawyers will still argue, and I will still tell them, shut the fuck up or your character's dead. I don't fuck around with rules lawyers anymore.
Usually when it comes to rules lawyers, I just say, speak up, I can't hear you from down there.
That's also true.
But then again, that's a case of, do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
Yes, I do have an idea of how little that narrows it down. We share the same height, Monk.
Yes. But overall, despite some issues that we have with some aspects of the text, we are off to a relatively strong start. I know we didn't get into a bit of the crunch, but keep in mind the first episode of seasons is often setting the stage for things. I can say that when it comes to the mechanics that I am familiar with this, the inspirations are going to very much tell us what we're dealing with. And I like to read off some of the inspirations that are listed here. Some of them I can see, some of them might be a little bit of a stretch. And this was right in the opening credits.
Okay.
Exalted, Artesia, RuneQuest, Lancer, Broken Worlds. I believe that's the RPG adaptation of Kill 6 Billion Demons. D&D 4th Edition, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Strike, which I covered years ago, Shadow of the Demon Lord, which I also covered, Apocalypse World, which I've covered indirectly, Sagas of the Icelanders, which I haven't covered yet.
I've played that.
Yep. I've played Sagas of the Icelanders, I just haven't covered it here. Dreams Askew, which I have, along with Dream Apart. Blades in the Dark, which I've indirectly covered. Wanderhome, Ryutama, Heart of the Wulin, Trespasser, and Icon. There was also the fact that the itch.io page for this game has notes that it was submitted for the 4F Tactical Jam. Now, the 4F Tactical Jam was a game jam that was done on itch. I've wanted to do a game jam at some point, or be in part of one. It's just the way a lot of them work ends up running counter to how I do things. That whole weekly talking about what you did this week, that's not how I work.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing started because Natalie Libra, aka Big Stuffed Cat on Twitter, had said, if 4E is so good, why isn't there a sequel? Where's 4F? and it was about trying to make a tactical combat type of TTRPG. And there were quite a few submissions. Gubat-Banwa is one of them, but also um, Weirdwood Hand, which I don't have yet. Temples of the Infinite, which described itself as Dragon Ball Z meets Planescape by way of Quantum Leap. Um,
Wait. Say that again?
Dragon Ball Z meets Planescape by way of Quantum Leap, the RPG.
That I want to play that now.
Um, Cyber War 2.0, Arc Frontier, which calls itself a tactical RPG in space, Heroes of the Exploding Kingdoms version 7.2, um, Twilight Kingdoms, which I have some familiar with, and its creator Peter Lacara has shown up for one of his other projects. I also found out that I was taking notes from him by accident because he was the designer of the FFD20 Saga Edition version that I ran a few campaigns of years ago.
Huh.
Although when I found out about that, he was like, "You," and he found out what we're doing. He was like, "You have my permission to steal from that project if need be," which I appreciated. But by the time I did that interview, we were way too far in.
Mm-hmm.
I may consider it for the future, um, along along with a homebrew supplement for Lancer called Juno and Hawk. Uh, the and what I take away from that kind of jam is that as much as some people want to turn up their nose at the idea of emphasizing tactical combat not being role playing enough, it struck enough of a chord with people that I've had several projects that very much lean into it even to this day. And it's for that reason that I don't think the idea of tactical combat can be written off as much as the Ivory Tower would like it to, while they pretend that they're character actors, or even not character actors, method actors. Character actors know how to have fun.
Yes, they do.
Method actors, look, I know some method actors, and some of them are nice guys, but there is no shortage of stories if you look at various films of character actors being complete and utter dicks.
You mean method actors?
Yeah, method actors. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, there are also some method actors that have nearly killed themselves for the roles. Hello, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis. Ledger allegedly was method, and apparently when he took up the role of Joker, um, Jackman warned him about not getting too far into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But what I can see from the inspirations is clearly some of these don't fit. Like if you think of it at just surface level, like Lancer, if you're thinking at just surface level, people would be like, "What does a mecha RPG have to do with this?" And like you said, it's more about mechanics and game feel.
mm-hmm.
In which case, I can see Lancer.
Lancer was built as a very tactical experience when it comes to its combat.
Exactly.
Um, Shadow of the some of them are, I will admit, are a little bit more of a stretch. Like say Shadow of the Demon Lord. There's certainly some tactical elements there, but Shadow of the Demon Lord's crunch medium, bordering on crunch light.
I mean, we even stole from Shadow of the Demon Lord in Legend Edition.
Mm-hmm. And Broken Worlds, if it's the one I'm thinking of, was largely based on Apocalypse World in terms of its setup. RuneQuest I can see in terms of the over the topness. More so, I'd say RuneQuest would serve as an inspiration more for setting than for mechanics. Because RuneQuest
Yeah.
for the longest time, aside from one or two significant exceptions, I don't feel like getting into here because the idea of doing a summary of RuneQuest over the decades, I barely got away with that when I reviewed Mithras, but it's been the patient zero for what's known as the basic role-playing system by Chaosium,
Hmm.
which is nowhere near tactical. It's largely built on percentage.
Yeah. Um, I have to I have to go back to Sagas of the Icelanders for just a second. I could see where they're getting that, where they'd be using that for the narrative mechanics specifically. In the few sessions of Sagas of the Icelanders I've ever played, things get bombastic very quickly, both narratively and mechanically. Um, the most notable being the very first session of Sagas of the Icelanders I ever played. Um, we started in the mead hall at the end of autumns. You know, winter was coming. Everybody was gathering together, getting the rest of the harvest in, etc. And insulting people to their faces has consequences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there, my character's sitting there, drinking, having fun with the other, uh, technically just footmen. We were just footmen of the small village. And my friend's character comes in, sits down with the rest of us, isn't one of the footmen, isn't even a farmer, he is just kind of the village lagabout, insults one of the footmen to his face, and because his rolls were so bad, was immediately given a facial scar and castrated. And I was like, this game is fucking what? At the time. This is years ago. I was just like, the fuck is going on? Why did you just cut off his balls? Obviously, in character, I'm like, yeah, he deserved it. But like outside, I'm like, why? And that was my first ever introduction to Sagas of the Icelanders. So it has a thing in my brain, a very very big space in my brain going, hey, just remember, if you're a footman in an Icelander village, you can cut off someone's balls if they insult you. So I could definitely see where that would tie into narrative mechanics for this game, since things are supposed to be melodrama. I just
Mm-hmm.
had to tell that story.
And with that in with that in mind, when we return to Gubat-Banwa next, that's when we're going to start getting into the crunchier bits because next week we're going headfirst into character creation, and we'll be kind of in the character creation end of things for several weeks. In fact,
Aye, aye.
throughout the entire month of July, that is through the entire month of June and a good chunk of July, that is going to be our focus.
Also, Monk, I know they didn't have a pronunciation guide for Kadunganon earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Kadunganon chapter.
Well, that's inconvenient.
But it kind of makes a certain logic to it, considering, Monk. I mean, it's still not the best logic, but it does make a certain logic. It's just Kadunganon.
Yeah.
So we've been basically saying it right.
Mm-hmm. But that is going to do it for this particular episode. We will be, as mentioned before, we will be back next week, and of course tomorrow we'll be continuing our weird and wonderful adventures into Sword World. as the party sees if they can get out of the shallow abyss that they've walked into.
We just gotta kill more demons and break the core. Arya is all set for this.
Mm-hmm.
Also, don't worry, rest of the party. I will be picking up every side quest I can because holy fuck, there are a lot of them.
Yes, there are. But that is going to do it for this. Thank you all for stopping by, and we will see you for Valley of the Judge next week. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.